The main struggle that we ADHDers have is not with motivation, but with consistency. If the conditions are right, we can motivate ourselves every single day. This was my first step to completely transforming my productivity. I talked to Dr. Halliwell, one of the leading experts in the ADHD space, and asked him what his thoughts are.
As long as what you're working on is stimulating, when we have stimulation, we hyper-focus.
In this video, we're not just scratching the surface. We're diving deep to uncover the secrets of how to actually get stuff done when you have ADHD. How ADHD powerhouses like David Goggins, Simone Biles, or Bill Gates stay so insanely productive. And no, it's not the same old advice you find in those boring productivity guides or generic online videos. I will walk you through 5 powerful strategies that completely changed my life from being stuck in a vicious cycle of procrastination, executive paralysis, and frustration to being able to instantly focus and execute and stay consistent with my daily tasks despite my ADHD. Spoiler alert, I won't just tell you to buy a planner. Oh, and stick around until the end because I will also reveal how you can access 3 bonus steps as well as a gamified tool that I built to track your progress for free. Before we dive headfirst into the strategies, let's talk about why the traditional productivity industry has failed us ADHDers. The reason for why you've most likely failed over the years is because most things you find when Googling on how to get stuff done don't work long-term for people with ADHD. Breaking tasks into endless smaller chunks, special to-do lists, or starting with the hardest thing first, I found that these strategies made it even more difficult for my brain to execute. What I had to learn was that to get stuff done consistently, you need to have high dopamine levels to feel motivated and focused. The problem is, our dopamine levels are usually way lower than for the average person. It's the reason why we are always looking for a kick, why we love annoying people, taking risks, or easily get addicted to fast food and video games, because these things all give our brains fast dopamine. And so naturally I thought this dopamine deficiency will make it infinitely harder for me to be productive. Turns out, this was not entirely true. It might sound crazy, but throughout my years of research, struggling myself and trying every solution under the sun, I learned how to actually use this dopamine deficiency to my advantage because my constant craving for dopamine is now able to get me addicted to completing work. Believe me, I never thought I would say this a few years ago. However, this allowed me to stay so consistent with uploading the videos you all know from me. So what's the trick? What completely changed the game for me was understanding that your ADHD brain is not wired for importance, but for interest. In other words, it is wired for what it wants to do, not for what it should do. This is why we have no problem in focusing or putting effort into playing video games for hours, but procrastinate on the laundry for days. But what's interesting for us, for people with ADHD, it's mainly challenge, fear, novelty, and connection. To make it easier for you to remember, I developed the NICE model. Our brains need tasks to be new, interesting, challenging, and to be treated like an emergency.
Nice.
But how do you make work nice and interesting, especially boring work? Is this even possible? And how do we optimize our daily tasks for our low levels of dopamine? Let's dive into the strategies. Strategy number 1, starting first thing in the morning. In the beginning, I made the mistake of listening to all these gurus out there telling me to meditate, journal, exercise, and then get to work. While a bit of that helped, it took away almost all my motivation and dopamine in the morning for my important tasks. Studies show that your dopamine levels are highest first thing in the morning, which also means you are most productive during this time. And so what I do now is wake up, put on some motivating music to get some easy and fast dopamine if I need help getting out of bed, I shower, and then get to work immediately. The only things you should do before your work are things that charge up your dopamine levels. Aerobic exercise or sunlight can help with that. I also like to take cold showers whenever I can because they've been shown to increase dopamine by over 500%. And the effect lasts for a few hours. So it's easily become one of my favorite and fastest ways to boost my dopamine naturally.
Good morning, friends. It is 9 a.m. I just woke up and it's time for a cold shower. It's always a bit scary when you go in.
Whew. Oh my god, that's cold.
Okay, maybe it's not my favorite way, but I then immediately sit down in front of my PC, get going by writing down what I need to do, actually time blocking my day over the calendar, because telling myself I'll just get to a certain thing whenever it doesn't work. And after an hour or so, make myself a coffee, which, you guessed it, increases dopamine as well. This is the procedure I follow almost every single day. Now, notice how I use the word almost. What I had to learn over time was that routines are incredibly difficult for us to maintain. Because once something no longer feels new, the dopamine fades and you start avoiding and dreading it. We are allergic to boredom, so it can feel like just wanting to run away from that familiarity. Now, what completely changed the game for me was having a few days where I break out of this routine on purpose. Where I journal or meditate or do it all at once. Yes, do exactly what the productivity gurus tell me to do, but only every once in a while, whenever my brain needs it. The point is to do something uncommon to make things less predictable for your brain and help it regain a sense of novelty for your old routine. This way, you can stay inconsistently consistent, which, however, wouldn't help you get anything done at all without breaking your big task into its first 3 steps. I know, in the beginning of this video, I mentioned how breaking a big task into all its small parts makes it even more difficult for our brains to start, but bear with me. Back in my professional job a few years ago, I often made the mistake of breaking up my big task into all its small puzzle pieces. Instead of check emails, it would be email Ralph, remember to send the email to Bob, double check the email from Sandra, send out offer to University X, CC Sandra and email to University X, write email to boss, etc. I'm getting overwhelmed just talking about it. I made checking emails into this huge list of to-dos, which massively increased the amount of motivation, aka dopamine, I needed in order to start, until I learned about dividing my task into just its first 3 steps. It turns out that once you focus on what's right in front of you, you can actually get started. I was like, 3 emails? That's easy. No problem. And this concept actually also works in regards to time. Imagine you have this huge task in front of you that will take hours. You get lost thinking about all the effort it will take, and so you procrastinate on it intensely. But what if you challenged yourself to work on it for just 5 minutes? Just 5 minutes and see what happens. Most of the time, I ended up working for way longer, especially when I converted fully by switching out my outcome-based goals to time-based goals. I realized that outcome-based goals, like finish writing 5 emails, set you up for failure because our estimates often aren't accurate. And it's a lot more daunting to have to start a task that you know you have to finish in a given time frame. Once there's no expectation of finishing attached, ironically enough, the task is easier to finish. For example, we switched that task out with reply to emails for 1 hour. Also, if we follow this do something principle, failure becomes unimportant because the only measure for success is acting.
Acting.
I don't mean Oscar-worthy acting. I mean sitting down and just doing it. We feel free to fail, and that freeness propels us forward. It's also why perfectionism always makes us stand still. Perfection seems too overwhelming to start on. But even if you focus on just the first 3 steps of a task and reformulate your goals to be time-based, you will still likely fail in the long run if you don't build momentum. The productivity industry often coins the term eat the frog, which means you should focus on the hardest thing to do first because you have the most energy when you start. Makes sense, right? We just talked about our dopamine levels being highest in the morning. Well, turns out it's not that simple. While neurotypical brains start from motivation level, say 10, our brains often start from motivation level -10. And so therefore, the hardest task, even if you want to tackle it first thing in the morning, will still be incredibly hard to initiate, even when we've structured it into its first 3 steps. We usually end up staring at that task and feeling like a massive failure. We procrastinate, shame and self-doubt creep in, and it's just not a good time. This is when I had to learn about the power of momentum and flipping the script on the traditional productivity industry by starting with the easiest thing first. Wait, the easiest thing? Yeah, the easiest thing. Starting with the thing that's so easy, you literally saved it for the end of the day because it's just gonna take a few minutes. Why? Because our brains need a quick dopamine hit to get started on things. Let me explain by giving you an example. Video games are designed to get you hooked by giving you easy tasks in the beginning at level 1, right? They then steadily increase the difficulty at higher levels because at that point you're already hooked and you therefore often tackle those more difficult tasks naturally. Whereas if you started with those, chances are you probably wouldn't have continued or given up. Action isn't just the effect of motivation, but also the cause of it. Action leads to more action. This is why when you do something for just 5 minutes, usually the rest will follow. Going back to me, I focus on the easiest task whenever I've had a break of work for longer than an hour, which is usually right after waking up and after lunch. I have a short call with a colleague, I get some notes down, or watch an informative video on something that I need to learn. The dopamine I get when taking off those easier tasks sort of then spills over into my more difficult tasks, making it easier to start on them, and once I start, I get going. This then gives you an on-ramp instead of needing to climb stairs, which helps you build a positive feedback loop and gets you addicted to winning. This was my first step to completely transforming my productivity by helping me build streaks. So why is it that we can hyper-focus on video games for hours but only read one page every 30 minutes? It's not just about starting easy. It's because video games have completely hacked our dopamine. And it's not just video games. Educational apps like Duolingo literally build their whole business model on helping their users achieve streaks. There's that word again. Streak. That's weird. Before diving into this one, let's first classify what a streak is, because I was as confused as you are. Duolingo classifies a streak as being the number of days in a row you completed lessons or practiced. And the more streaks you have, the more levels you gain. And so people need to come back every single day. Makes sense. But there's no way that an educational app that's tailored for learning and effort has people coming back every single day, right? There's just no way. Turns out there is. About 20% of all learners have streaks beyond 365 days. That's one whole year. How is this possible? Imagine doing something for 365 days. Imagine where you'd be a year from now if you stayed consistent with eating healthy, doing exercise. Chances are you would have achieved your goal. The main struggle that we ADHDers have is not with motivation, but with consistency. If the conditions are right, we can motivate ourselves every single day. So, to completely change the game, we need to start playing it. You need to do what all these games do, which is track and log your progress. But not in a boring way. You need to actually visually see where you were 20 days ago to where you are now, because that way the growth will excite you. I know, in the beginning it sounded way too complicated for me too. Like, where do I even start? Don't worry, I got you. Because I now like to track my momentum and streaks with a gamified tool that I built over Notion. And at the end of this video, I will reveal how you can access this gamified tool to track your momentum and productivity, as well as 3 bonus steps as well, completely free. To start, you can also just use a calendar and tick every day you've successfully sat down and worked for 30 minutes. What's important is that you put it somewhere every day where you see it so your brain doesn't forget. 3 things to remember here. First, consistency can look like this, and this. It's completely normal for us to have off days. The most important thing is that you're able to get back up. And so work at a pace that's good for you. Second, don't be too hard on yourself if you miss a day, just come back. And third, don't directly compare yourself to people like David Goggins.
Get out of your head and stay hard.
Compare yourself with yourself and start small. If 5 minutes of work each day seems difficult for you, then start with that. If just getting out of bed and showering is difficult for you, there's no shame in tracking that either. The point is that soon your brain will see building streaks as a challenge, and the last thing you'll want to do is break the chain, which will help you stay a lot more consistent and motivated in the long run. If you want to take it further, you can even try assigning points to specific tasks, but don't make it too complicated. If it's too complicated, your brain will probably need dopamine and therefore motivation to engage in just tracking your tasks, which would be very counterproductive. But even if you start in the morning, build momentum, and introduce streaks, you would still be missing one of the most essential pieces for ADHD productivity, which is regularly introducing novelty. There's a reason why we always switch our hobbies and want to turn our whole lives around every single week. We need constant feelings of newness to stay inspired, motivated, and get dopamine, which can be incredibly frustrating when we need to work on one boring task for hours, days, or maybe even weeks. So how do we solve this problem? What I learned over the years is that you can actually introduce novelty without changing the task you're working on to boost your motivation and focus for said task. I know, sounds complicated again, but it's actually really simple. Let's say you're working on your taxes. Regularly switching where you work, who you work with, or the time at which you're working on your taxes will all help you stay focused and motivated for that task because you're introducing novelty, which gives you dopamine. You can use everyday occurrences to introduce novelty into your workday. You might have caught yourself trying to finish the laundry before a specific song ends or finish writing that email right before an appointment. This is because you are challenging yourself, which makes the experience more new. On top of that, we ADHDers are very competitive, so challenging ourselves can work wonders. Alternating between different tasks can also help introduce novelty. Combining two tasks can also introduce novelty. Here's the crazy part though. Even the slightest tweaks in your work environment, like lighting or temperature adjustments, have been found to significantly improve focus and productivity. Fidget spinners, weighted blankets, standing desks are all sensory-based strategies with data to back them up. Now, next to these 5 methods, there are actually 3 more scientifically backed strategies that work in synergy with each other that helped me to completely eliminate my procrastination, executive dysfunction, and achieve life-changing focus at the push of a button. These are my favorite methods, proven to be most effective for years consistently. Because they take slightly longer to explain, I've put them together in a separate video which explains how you can easily apply them into your own life. Just click the link below to access it. This is where you'll also find the free Notion habit tracker I mentioned earlier. Also, I talked to Dr. Halliwell, one of the leading experts in the ADHD space, and asked him what his thoughts are on ADHD productivity. Here's what he had to say.
As long as what you're working on is stimulating, when we have stimulation, we hyper-focus. When we don't have stimulation, that's when we space out. Boredom is our kryptonite. We bounce off of it. We can't do boredom. But stimulation, in whatever form, draws us right in, and that's when we hyper-focus. Now, keep in mind, you can't do that indefinitely. It's tiring. And so, I can't write for much more than an hour at a time.
Special shout out to Jesse J. Anderson for his thoughts on ADHD productivity. I've linked his channel as well as his book, Extra Focus, down below. And of course, special shout out to all of you for following along. Check out these related videos if you haven't already. Stay inspired, and I'll see you very soon.